Hey everyone, today we've got a whole bunch of awesome new things to go through. First, we're going to talk a little bit more about the loader, specifically around how to do the layering, because I know a lot of you had asked how to use it a little more effectively. Secondly, we are going to run through an amazing new node that basically eliminates the need for canvas. It's bringing almost true Photoshop directly into Comfy. Also, we're going to go through step by step how to create an amazing silhouetting effect for your imagery. And finally, a bonus on how to create sliders to make your image creation as well as parameters easier to operate. As always, please feel free to like, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your grandparents. I'm just kidding. They probably won't want to do this, but you never know. But otherwise, let's get to it. All right, let's start first with the loader. So we've been playing with the loader for a little bit here. I've been making a few little tweaks here and there, which has been great, very efficient. But you had some really great feedback in wanting to learn a little bit more on how to use the new layering mechanism I had put into the workflow. So we're going to step through that a little slower so that we can kind of get you more comfortable with using this layering technique. So in this example, I have a simple render around a cornfield. Now, one thing you'll see that's new as part of this layering technique is this everything everywhere beamer, right? It's going to an input called layer 1. Now, if I hit 2 on my bookmarks, it's going to my layering area. And you can see, if I zoom in here, the first image that's coming in here automatically is called layer 1. So you could see how the beaming is happening. Basically, your input regex, as we did in the werewolf video quite a bit ago, your layer 1 labeling here is going to correspond with your input name. And you can always go in here and rename them, but we have it all named pretty nicely here. So layer 1 will automatically beam it into here. Now, the other pieces to this are as we're talking about overlay, is what are we going to be overlaying on top of the background? So in this case, I had renamed this to O11, overlay 11, and M11, mask 11. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be O anything or M anything. It's just going to be easier when we're talking about quickly beaming different layers to overlay or to switch the order of layers. We can do that very, very quickly here. So basically, O11 is the first layer, O12 is the second layer on top of the first layer, O13, etc. And if I go down here, you can see I have a second set of layers, layer 2, where you can basically beam any one of these simple images or overlaid images onto here as the starting point. And I have O21, right? So the overlay of the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. Again, the naming doesn't matter. You can actually rename it whatever you want. But when you have to quickly remember, like, oh, which image slot do I want to overlay on? This is going to help you remember in a quicker way. So let's kind of zap back to bookmark 1. And you can see, right, again, we have our scene, our cornfield. And I created 2 quick subjects here, right? I have a scarecrow and a crow. Okay, and so as we know with the subject, right, we're going to beam that layer over. Now we have to mask it, so we're going to go right click and go and do a quick SAM masking. Okay, that's good enough. We're going to clean it up with the mask editor. So let's do that. We're going to just do a little quick zap, zap, zap. All good. Doesn't have to be perfect because, again, as always, we'll have to re-render at the end. Okay, awesome. And you can see here, these are, again, right now bypassed, right? They're not being used. So we're going to unbypass them. Okay, and so you can see, this is again using the beamer. We're going to want to beam it to a particular slot. So in this case, I already have it by default, O11 and M11, right? Our first overlay and our first mask. And you could see, right, if I now hit 2 to go back to my layering, you could see it brings it in automatically. Again, you may want to, mask it a little better. Again, when you render it in the final image to image, it'll be fine. But what's the nice thing is you didn't have to actually do any major effort. Now here, right, after you size it, let's say it's perfectly sized the way we want, you could see your overlay is going from the first image into the second image, but you don't have your second overlay layer or your mask. And so that's where, again, your next beaming is going to come in. So in order to do that, we're going to go back to our second subject. Our second subject is the crow. And you can see here, just as before, right, we're going to mask out our character. So we're going to go back into Sam. We'll clear our dots. We'll pick a new dot here. All right, needs a little bit extra around the edges. Great. Okay, a little bit of cleanup again in the mask editor. So we're going to go open our mask editor and just do a little bit of cleanup here and there. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be fixed when it gets down to our image to image. Okay, good enough. And as before, we will unbypass. Okay, and by default, when I have this in my node template, it does come up as 011, which we don't want that. So we want to change this now to 012 and mask 1, 2, right? Because that was the second slot that we had set up in our layers. And if I rerun it and go back to my layers, you can see, right? Let me actually zoom to my inputs here. You can see 012, M12, 013, M13. So every time you quickly name which layer you want to go to, you will be able to quickly overlay any of the items on top of each other. The key element to keep in mind, as you can see, the crow is on top of layer-wise the scarecrow, right? If you wanted the scarecrow to be in front, you would have to reorder these images. Now, prior to having this sort of quick layering part of the workflow set up, it was a bit of a pain, right? You'd have to totally rework and rewire all your nodes. But in this case, it's very, very simple. Why? Because we, again, remember, we want 011 and M11 for our first layer and 012 and M12 for our second layer. So if I go back to my subjects and I said, oh, you know what? I actually want my crow to be behind my scarecrow. So in this case, I'll just update my layers to say, well, I want my crow to be in the first layer, and then I want my scarecrow to be in the second layer, right? Because we're going based on those beamers. And then you just rerun it. Let's go back and look at that, right? Your crow's in your first slot, your scarecrow's in the second. The crow is behind the scarecrow. Now, it's not perfect, of course, in this case, because you have to, resize it and move it around and stuff. But, conceptually, hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. All right, let's get to our second subject. So in this case, I have my beach scene that I put together. It's nice. But I want to obviously add this kind of black silhouette-y effect with either different shapes or different subjects. I found, obviously having a bigger blockier or blotchier sort of shape gets you a really great result, but you experiment, right? If you're doing a beach and you wanted to do a cruise ship and have kind of the outline to be the shape of the cruise ship, go for it. Or if you want a martini glass or you want, a couple kissing or whatever, you have absolute creativity open for you to do that. Okay, so we're going to go over to our heart shape. And in this case, I did an automatic masking because I didn't want to have to keep messing around with, well, which heart, which shape, do I have to want to manually mask it or Sam mask it, etc. So I just prompted a heart symbol, and I used my dino mask from our previous dino masking video to automatically select the heart. Now from our other video also with growing and blurring, I have a grow mask with blur. This is in KJ nodes. And so I'm basically expanding out the heart mask. Before it's very crisp, but now it's nice and soft and blurry because I wanted to have kind of almost like a nice glow effect. And so once I have the heart set up, what do I want to do with it? So I'm going to now beam my masked image, right? Kind of like the black and white image, because I'm not going to, I want to have that outline to be a black silhouette. So I'm using my mask as the image to beam over, right? So I'm basically converting my mask over to an image, which is just a black and white image, this guy, right? And I'm going to use the same layering technique that we have before that we just ran through, 011, overlay slot 1, mask 1, 1, first mask slot. And I'm going to now overlay that into my scene. So you can see really nice image, which is a great starting point for my shot. Now, I wanted to be able to, I'm doing kind of like, let's say, a romance novel sort of cover. So I want to add a person, and I also want to add some text, which we've had previous techniques to run through both. But we're going to go into now the reason that I think Canvas node is now dead. Okay, so let's go back here. So we're going to jump into our second subject here. Our second subject is a girl. She has kind of a blank type of expression, crossing her arms. Great. Well, we're going to, as we know, as we've been playing with, we're going to quickly mask her out in this case. All right, so that's good enough. And we're going to rerun it. And we're going to jump back to our layers here. And you can see we have our girl. And it's okay that there's a little bit of, white silhouetting outside of her, because once you re-render together, it'll fix that. And now we want to do our text. Now, previously, we had to do text in a very special way. Well, all of a sudden, we now have a new node that you'll want to go to your manager right away, for sure, and type in Photopea. Now, many of you know that Photopea is an online, pretty much Photoshop and free web app that sits separately, right? It's a unique website, and it's great on its own. But someone actually put it into Comfy and fully integrated into Comfy. So definitely install that. You'll want to restart. And now on your preview bridges or any of the areas where you would do normally your masking type stuff, even your load image, you can now right click, and at the top is open in Photopea editor. And when you do that, you basically have, if you full screen this thing, a full, pretty much Photoshop-like experience to be able to play with, right? So what does that mean? All the elements of, wanding, text, perspective, bludge, NUR, filters, everything. It's all here. So in this case, I am going to create a layer. It's Control-Alt-T here, just because it I think has a little bit of a challenge with some of the native browser shortcuts as well. All the things that you can normally do in Photoshop, you can definitely do here. So all right, so we've got our person here. We've got Lost in Love, right? That's awesome. And let's say that's all we want. So when you hit Save to Node, it saves it into the node for you to then go into the rest of your experience, which is awesome, right? And so as you can see, I'm basically doing my image render to render of my scene here, right? A ultra realistic woman, heart picture, et cetera, right? And you could see it starts to clean up some of those highlights, those halos we were talking about. And then I also, of course, have a nice face detailer because I want her to look sad, which I've included. And then even if, I had some previous like artifacts here and we used from our last video with the Big Llama remover to do some cleanup. So you can see very, very quick to get to your final picture. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Okay, on to the bonus. So previously we were using our image, empty image latent to specify a new width and height, and you have to figure out, well, what's the height and what do I want it to look like, and you have to kind of calculate in your brain like what you want that image to look like. Well, there's another new node that came out recently called the MX tools. So if you go to and all these links will be in the description, but basically if you search for MX, you'll see the MX toolkit right here. So you'll want to install that. And a couple really cool tools here. First of all is different types of sliders available for you to pop into your inputs. So in this case, instead of having to be like, well, I kind of want a horizontal image, but I don't know what the dimensions are. Now you can just basically say, well, I want it to look like that. Oh, and it automatically has your dimensions right here already ready for you, right? So you don't have to do anything special. And in fact, if you can customize these yourself. So in fact, if I created another one that I wanted to be super specified. So I'm stepping up by a smaller amount and I want a bigger resolution. And you can say, I want this vertical shot or I want a horizontal shot. Very, very quick to do that. In fact, if I go to the properties for this guy, you can see under the properties panel a whole bunch of different parameters that you can set for that slider. So you can say what's the default value, what is the minimum and maximum values for that, how many do you want it to jump by per value, right? So in this case, I'm jumping by 128 because I want it to be a base of 128 every time I jump. You may want to have it jump by 1 or by 100 or by 1,000. You can set what limits you want for your slider. Also, if you want to include decimals, right? Especially when you're talking about float values. All right, well, you may want 1 decimal, you want 2 decimals. You can do that. You can turn on and off if it snaps to that grid. You can also turn on the dots. Do you see the dots flipping on and off? So this is extremely powerful for setting up any sort of slider. It doesn't have to be for image resolution. It could be for really any slider you want. Now, this is a 2-dimensional one, which is great for image definition. In fact, I did this now going forward into my normal node template for new. You can see now I can just quickly be like, oh, all right, I want it to be that big. So that's going to be very quick instead of having to figure out and specify unique identified values for your new images. So that's one. There's also another slider, which is just a regular slider, right? So this is a slider. Right now, by default, it goes 0 to 100, but similar to the other one, you can go into the properties panel and say exactly what you want it to be. So let's say you are doing this for your CFG, right? Or you're perturbed. Let's say you want your perturbed to be a quick slider and that's it. So maybe you just want it to be you want it to start at 1 and you're going to minimum, let's say, is 0.5 because you don't want it to be anything below that. And the maximum is, let's say, 12, right? You don't want it to go beyond 12 and you want it to jump by 0.1 each. And you want it to also be 1 decimal, right? So you want it to be able to specify by 1. And you could see as I did that, the slider now is exactly what you want it to be. So if I'm jumping now into any sort of situation where I have, let's say, my CFG, right? Instead of actually specifying the CFG manually every time there, I can just have CFG as an input and I bring it in to there. So now I always have my slider here and I don't have to futz with any sort of special values or whatever. I can just be like, okay, this is going to be 5. Done. Right? Super simple. So you can see that's great. And then the other tool that's really great in this new node set is a new kind of rerouting. So, for those that create buses, I typically don't. I'm messy with my workflows a little bit, but a lot of people like to create buses, which are basically all of your different input strings that are connecting and kind of wrapping around. The challenge with rerouting is it's a little bit blocky. So you can see each one of these reroute nodes, if you're going, let's say from, I'm just making this up, but if you're going, well, let's take this, right? We're going from a slider into the reroute because we want it to be kind of up here and then we want to bring it down into our CFG. That's great, but then you have all these little blockies all over the place. Someone had developed actually a much cleaner sort of reroute node that's I find to be a little more just aesthetically pleasing. So if I go here, I just have it in my little toolbar. This is from our last video if you didn't install your toolbar yet. And you can see this is it. So, in terms of the actual look and feel, you can see it's significantly cleaner in terms of setting up your own kind of buses and whatnot. So highly recommend this. This is cool. Also, by the way, you can reverse the direction, right? So if you went here to your properties, and if you just change your input to right, it will automatically understand, oh, okay, I'm actually starting from the right side, and I'll end up on my left side, right? So you can see how it kind of reroutes it that way. So again, something to fool with. I think it's kind of cool. But you can see it's pretty powerful also in terms of organizing your workflows a little bit more. Okay, well, hope this was helpful as always. Please, as always, feel free to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Very much appreciated. If you want, feel free to support us by hitting the join button and jumping into a level. And otherwise, we will talk to you soon.